Esther Chapter 2, Through the Bible, Part 4. We are told that the king loved Esther. I must confess that I am not impressed by it at all. Those of you who have read my book on Ruth know the emphasis put upon the romance of Boaz and Ruth, the loveliest love story, I think, that has ever been told. It is a picture of Christ's love for his church. But I have to say that I do not find that quality in the story of Ahasuerus and Esther. This is an old, disappointed king who almost had reached the end of the road. I am reminded of the story of a foreigner who came to this country. He asked, "What is this, these 3 R's that I keep hearing about in this country?" Some wiseacre gave him this answer: "At 20 it is romance, at 30 it is rent, and at 50 it is rheumatism." Well, it was rheumatism with the king. This is an old king marrying a lovely young girl. He is an old pagan with no knowledge at all of what real love in God might mean to a couple. I must say that I cannot see anything here to wax eloquent about or to say that this is a picture, as some have done, of Christ and his church. However, the event is of utmost importance. It is thrilling to see this girl, belonging to a captive people, suddenly become queen over one of the greatest Gentile empires the world has ever seen. The wave of anti-Semitism that was imminent would have blotted out these people, and God's entire purpose with Israel would have been frustrated. But when danger strikes, Esther is in a unique position. God moved her into that place. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts, according to the state of the king. Esther 2 verse 18. You will remember that this book opened with a feast. Now we have another feast, Esther's feast. Since the king has a lovely queen to take Vashti's place, he suspends taxes for 1 year. If such a thing were done in our day, it would rock the world. It is interesting to see that the king did have the authority to suspend taxes for a year. We all would rejoice if they would conduct some kind of contest in Washington, D.C. that would help reduce taxes. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther 2 verse 19. Mordecai has a new position, not a job, a position. He is sitting in the king's gate. This means that he is a judge, for the courthouse of the ancient world was the gate of the city. Most of the cities were walled, and out through the gate all the citizens would pass sooner or later. Court convened at the city gate, not at the courthouse in the town square. You may recall that the city gate was the place Boaz went to have a legal matter settled. Also, it is said of Lot that he sat in the gate, which meant that he had gotten into politics in Sodom and had a judgeship. Look at Mordecai. Isn't it interesting that when Esther becomes queen, the next thing you know, Mordecai is a judge, sitting in the gate? That is nepotism, or getting your kinfolk into office. I do not know whether Mordecai was made judge because of his ability or because Esther whispered in the ear of the king, "This man Mordecai has been just like a father to me. He is a man of remarkable ability, and I think you ought to give him a good position." And the king may have said, "Well, that is interesting. We've just had an opening for a judge here at the East Gate, and I'll give him that position." This is a very human book, you see, and politics haven't changed one bit, have they? Esther had not yet shewed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. Esther 2 verse 20. This girl is a rather remarkable person. Even married to the king, she still takes instructions from the man who reared her. And I will say that I believe Mordecai is one of the outstanding men in Scripture to whom we have paid very little attention. He apparently was a man of remarkable ability. At this point something takes place that seems extraneous, and yet it is upon this incident that the whole book hinges. As someone has said, God swings big doors on little hinges. Again we see the providence of God. He is moving behind the scene here. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth, and sought to lay hand on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. Esther 2 verse 21 to 23. This is an interesting incident. Mordecai was sitting at the gate. Crowds were coming and going through the gate. He heard two men talking, and he heard them mention the name of the king. He cupped his ears so he could hear what they were talking about and discovered they were plotting to kill the king. So Mordecai immediately got word to Esther about the plot. This is a very familiar picture. An oriental potentate and fellows with long mustachios hiding behind pillars, plotting against the king. Actually, intrigue in an oriental court was common. There always seemed to be someone who was after the king's job. Mordecai's new position gained him a vantage point so that he was able to overhear the plot. After Mordecai told Esther about the plan to kill the king, Esther told her husband, "I suppose," she said to the king, "you remember that I recommended Mordecai as a judge, and you can see that he is already doing an excellent job. He has discovered a plot against your life. The FBI investigated and found it to be true." These fellows were then arrested. They didn't have a long, drawn-out trial that spent taxpayers' money. The king ordered them to be put to death, and they were executed by hanging. This was to discourage others who might attempt to plot against the king. Of course, they were very uncivilized in that day, but they did not go in for lawlessness and pampering criminals. This entire incident was written down in the Chronicles of the king, in the minutes, if you please, of the kingdom of Persia. It is interesting to see that something was omitted here. Mordecai was not rewarded or recognized for his service. I suppose he brooded over it many times, wondering why in the world he had been ignored. He wasn't even given a Boy Scout badge or a lifesaver button for saving the king's life. Certainly he deserved that much. Why was this incident passed by? God is overruling. By his providence, God is directing this entire affair.